This is Scott McDonald of drdemographics.com, and I want to share with you some information about where to put a practice. Now, typically, when people are discussing what they like about a location, often they'll jump on a couple of facts. One is competition ratios. They'll say, I don't want an area that has a lot of competition. And I understand that. There does exist a feeling that somehow if there are a lot of competitors, it's not a good location. I get that. But you have to understand also, as a demographer, that there are lots and lots of other factors that are going to be extremely important about the location that you're wanting to go or to consider. And one of those things is not just demographics, which are how many people there are or what the competition ratio might be. It may not be psychographics, in which you're determining the demand for a particular service based upon what people's preferences are. I want to get into one area that almost nobody discusses, and that is geography. Now, yeah, demographics and psychographics are not geography, but they do have an important impact on each other. And if you want to understand what we refer to as the demographic context of a location, you've got to understand the factors involved in geography. So stick with me for just a few minutes. We're going to talk about it here. I call this episode Borders and Boundaries because it is exactly what it means. You're going to have context for the geographic location you're looking at and a context for whether a location has sufficient numbers of potential patients. Are those patients close to the site? What other geographic factors are going to matter and make it a good location to go to? So please stick with me here. I understand this may be a little bit new to you. Now, all practices need context to understand competition ratios. In other words, it isn't enough to say, are there a lot of doctors or a few doctors that are competitors, but also what the nature of the population is and its contents or context upon the geographic area that you're looking. It will influence demographics and community trends and psychographics as well. You need to understand the borders and the boundaries about a practice location, as I'll bring up in just a minute. A doctor who is in Chicago, Illinois, is not going to be in competition with someone in Los Angeles. They're just too far apart. People are not going to think, yeah, that's a place that I'd consider an alternative location. Usually the distance and the time that it means to get there, what we refer to as an isochrone, is particularly important. Now, when you want to have a rational practice site evaluation, there are three things I want you to keep in mind. What defines the practice area that you're in right now? In other words, there are boundaries and there are barriers to where you might want to go. For example, you know that interstate freeways, for example, are a natural barrier or a conduit for the population to travel. You have to take those into account if you're going to look at a location and say, that is where I'm going to be drawing my patients. You will also want to ask, how will the practice area change in its geographic context in 1 year or 5 years or even in 10 years? Because you can be sure that demographics and the geographic barriers are a moving target. They're not going to be the same all the time. And what are the practice properties at this time? So there are already practice barriers that you know about, major streets or major places that are providing context, makes it a better or worse location to be in. Let's start out with knowing those facts. Why does this area exist? Why do people travel to and from this location? Is this a place where people live predominantly, or do they work in this area predominantly, or what mix is there? This is, by the way, what we refer to as daytime population. Not only how many people live there, but also how many people who work there and why they are traveling to or from the site. Are they going there for school? Are they going there for shopping? Are they going there to live or to work? Now, how viable is this location is a question that you have to kind of ask subtly. Why does it exist at all? And is it going to be a better place over a period of time? In other words, is it a good investment? Now, there are some ways that we define place or location. And one of the easy ones is a mile radius. So you draw a circle and you say, how large is that circle and how many people live within it? So you are defining geographically already the areas that you're considering. Maybe it's just a few square blocks. Maybe it's miles. Maybe it is a topographical defined area like a valley or a mountain or a new housing development. So the mile radius is probably the easiest one to understand. And we refer to that as an isochrone, the time that it takes to travel from one place to another. The drive time, this is the distance that you want to take in context for the day part. So during what time of day are you likely to have the most traffic or the least traffic? Is it desirable based upon the daytime because of the evening or morning commute? Or is it a barrier to your success? You also have to keep in mind that within a geographic area, you're looking at a target market. So the people who live within that mile radius or the time measurement are going to be more alike than different. So a place that is very upscale, that is growing, that has other factors that you want, that's what we refer to as the target market. And understanding the kinds of people who live within a geographic area is what you want to know. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of people can report on the demographics, but they will understand almost nothing about why people are traveling to or from this location. In other words, what makes it a good place for you to go. Accessibility issues also matter. So the roads, the arteries, and even the landmarks that draw people to a particular area are important to the success of the practice. La Brea Tar Pits is a place on Wilshire Boulevard in Southern California. Do people go to the tar pits? Yeah, well, yeah, but there's a lot of shopping and a lot of work within the area that really defines it, and how easy it is to get from where people live and work is a matter of accessibility and is exceptionally important. Now, the definition is relevant to the practice type and the hours of operation. You already know that surgeons, cosmetic surgeons, oral surgeons, orthopedic surgeons are not looking at the same business scale during the same time of day as those who might be coming for other reasons. The reason people come there during a particular time of day is determined by the practice type. So the hours of operation will often be defined by who is likely to want to go to receive those services at any given time of the day. Now, if it's a pediatric area, if there's a geriatric market, if people are coming directly to work or from work, these are imperatives that will define how good the area is, not based upon some criteria of the demographic character, but rather you have to ask yourself, why are people here at that time of day? And that is a viability question, something that's really important for you to know. Now, all factors are influenced by the desired demographics. You already know that pediatric practices are going to need lots of children, or those that deal with geriatric issues, age-based healthcare. It doesn't mean they're good or bad. It just means, are they appropriate for the kinds of services that the practice are going to offer? And you need to know this to say, is this site viable for my kind of practice? And that's what Dr. Demographics does. We can tell you, is this viable based upon what you're offering and the kinds of people who live and work in the area. Now, the definitions of the borders that we're talking about, there are only a few. Now, they can be more closely defined, I suppose, but in general category, we're going to talk about time. So what time of day are the kinds of patients that you want going to be found in that area? How far are people willing to drive? Now, you already know Riverside, California, for example, has one of the longest commutes on the West Coast. And you also know that if an area is very densely populated, it's a very urbanized area, in other words, people are unwilling to travel very far. So you have to say, what are the demographic factors regarding the borders that are going to matter to the kind of practice I want to have? So time and distance are obviously used in border definitions. And there's also simple facts that some people are going to come up against a river or a mountain, a steep incline, and that is going to be a topographical definition of the area and how desirable it's likely to be. So topography matters. You don't want to say it's too good or too bad, an area based only on topography, but you have to know it in order to determine the viability of that site. Now, the rate of transit, and this is why urban customers are not willing to travel very far, population density does count. The rate of transit, how long it takes to get over a period of time, a distance, matters to the kind of practice you want to have and the people who are willing to go to your practice in that transit. Now, there's a recognized danger in some areas. It may be a high crime area, or they may perceive it as a difficult place to travel through or on. This is a form of inconvenience, and you have to know it's going to matter because it's going to show a natural boundary topographically and through other factors like time, distance. It's going to matter why people come to that particular office. Now, I understand this is complicated, but you see, doctor demographics exists to help you understand the implications of the time in transit. Now, negative perceptions exist. Some places this place is terrible because of the direction of travel at the end of a commute or the beginning of a commute day. So therefore, there are negative perceptions on speed limits or steep grades or bridges or mountains or rivers. And you want to know the perceptions of the population. It may surprise you to know that demographers, like me, can know exactly what the perceptions are going to be of a roadway or a transportation artery that people will travel. And some places are going to be so difficult they will avoid at all costs going on that road. Other destinations, such as schools and shopping, large places of employment, matter because the places that are the destinations are going to be either good or bad. And that matters to you determining, is this a place for my practice to go? Now, we can help with these issues. We can help define them. And I want to keep a couple of things in mind because some of these things are in flux. So right now, gas prices are very high. People are going to be inclined not to travel a great distance because it costs a lot of money to get from point A to point B. The other thing is area more or less desirable, including the speed limits. Now, it is not fixed. It is going to change. And I know personally, having been in a commute situation, that some locations that were good last year or 10 years ago may be terrible right now because of the direction of travel. And also topographical factors like bridges and valleys and steep inclines will make an area or a direction of travel more or less desirable. Now, the physical characteristics of the area are in topography. Roads are being enhanced all the time. And so when we talk about the infrastructure in the area, bridges, off-ramps, on-ramps, they're going to matter, and they change from time to time. These perceived characteristics of the area you're going on are topographical, and they matter. And that's something that we watch all the time at Dr. Demographics. Now, there's another thing I want you to know. It's called proxemics. Proxemics is the study of something that is close or distant. It is how difficult a place is to get to or away from. And they call it proxemics. It's something you may not know that you are already adhering to, but you want to know what's going to matter about how to get to a place and how conveniently perceived a site is in order to know, is this a good place for me to put a practice up or not? Psychologically, this is weird stuff because sometimes it doesn't make any sense. And I'm going to tell you one thing that doesn't make sense. On the south side of town, in almost every part of the United States, it's perceived as not as desirable as the northern side. Rich people live on the northern side of town, poorer people live on the southern side of town. And you may say, no, but there's an exception to that. Yeah, I know that. But I'm just telling you, most demographers understand you want to stick on the north side of an area because it's perceived as being more desirable. There are perception things that you should know about. Now, you remember in The Lord of the Rings how Treebird was talking to the two hobbits on his shoulders, and he said, I like traveling south. It always feels like I'm going downhill. Now, that's silly, but it's true. And therefore, the direction of travel, north, south, east, or west, matters to the people who are making that trip. I just thought you ought to know. Now, as to borders and boundaries, there are a few other things I want you to keep in mind. The covenant not to compete is usually decided by the seller. He'll say, you cannot draw from this area because it feels like you're poaching my patient base. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but that's something usually you want to pay attention to. Because the places that are most desirable regarding where a practice location is not set in stone. It changes. Now, most are imaginary, these beliefs that people have, but it's based on real behaviors, and there are reasons why practice owners like certain locations because they feel like that's where my patients come from, or where I'm afraid you're going to hurt my practice existing if you set up in this area, and therefore the covenant not to compete exists. Now, most carry a value. In other words, I mean good or bad. It's too. This is something that I often help practices work with, and Dr. Demographics consultants are really good at it in deciding, is this a rational place to put a practice and put a covenant area? You know that in some states, unless you can actually prove that it's going to hurt or help where the locations are, many states are saying you cannot take the covenant not to compete and enforce it. Some other states are. Again, that's one of those areas that we can really help you a lot. So how far is too far? Well, that depends on the type of practice. Pediatric endocrinologists, you may have to travel half hour or an hour. Other kinds of practices, like a general dental practice, 15 minutes can be a big difference. Even 5 minutes matters a lot. So how far is too far depends on the type of practice and the distribution of businesses in the referral base, and also housing relative to the site of the practice. You want the answers? We can help you get them. If you want to find Dr. Demographics, please visit us at drdemographics.com or write at info@drdemographics.com. Our toll-free number is 833-424-6222. Consultations increasingly are being done in the evenings and on Saturdays. And that's because a lot of people don't want to talk to a specialist like us during their work hours. So we make a limited number of consultations available nights and weekends. We're here to help you out. Now, parents and significant others are always involved in these decisions. So if you're going to have a consultation, we strongly recommend you get on the phone call with us. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to helping you in the future. And let us know how we can help you find the perfect place to put a practice. Take care.